This turmoil is unfolding at a time when the United States is just weeks away from its presidential election. There's talk and a lot of commentary around the October surprise and how this could potentially benefit Republican nominee and past President Donald Trump. Is it your sense as well that in the US elections, the turmoil in Iran and Israel could potentially actually work to Donald Trump's advantage?
Well, it depends on how big it gets. I mean, if you actually have a situation where the United States is becoming involved in war or Americans are being killed, and Americans have to actually consider the possibility of war, I think that advantages Donald Trump over Kamala Harris, largely because of the biases about gender, race, etc., that exist in large parts of the United States. And also because the election is not going to be decided by those who already know who they're going to vote for. It's going to be decided by undecided voters who may go one way or the other based on very, very last-minute things. And this issue is exactly perhaps why Israel feels that it has a vacuum in which it can push much harder, because the Biden administration, fearful of reaction in the elections, is not putting its foot down with Israeli actions. In fact, for instance, it claimed that it didn't even know or approve of Israel's killing of Hassan Nasrallah. And also, Israel does not worry about Donald Trump winning. I mean, it's possible that Prime Minister Netanyahu would actually welcome a Republican administration under Trump. So America's domestic issues at this moment in time are also part of the strategic calculation by both sides.
No, but I want to press you further on this. Given that we're in the middle of an election, given that Kamala Harris in the public comments that we heard from her seemed far more soft on Palestine and far sterner with Israel, pushing harder for a ceasefire, pushing harder for a hostage release and for a cessation of military action, how does that impact her candidature, given how hot button Jewish politics and everything to do with Israel is in the American political context?
Well, American politicians, both Trump and Kamala Harris, express deep support for Israel. So that's not what's going to separate them from one from the other. For a lot of Americans, it's not what they're saying about Israel, it's how they judge a president at a particular point in time to be able to be a commander during a war. If you're in peacetime and war is not on the horizon, you focus on the economy or you focus on varieties of other issues. And it's also possible that the Americans will continue to just vote on the economy or such issues as the right to abortion or those sorts of issues. But if, and that's a big if the war enters into their calculation, if they begin to decide, are we going to go to war, then perhaps, based on historical view, that Donald Trump will be viewed by those undecided voters in the middle, the ones that probably have some Republican leaning, some Democratic leaning, but are neither Democrat nor Republican, that among them, that they may view him as a tougher commander-in-chief. I mean, Kamala Harris is has not been in this, wasn't in the Senate for long, is new to that level of American politics, is a woman, is a minority. You know, there are these prejudices also in American society. And so at least many pundits believe that war does not benefit the Democrats at this point in time. I mean, the Republicans have historically been seen as much tougher on national security issues. Although I have to say, this perception may not be supported by reality, because Donald Trump has an aversion to war. He didn't want to go to war with Iran when he was president. Yes, he killed General Soleimani. He talked tough, but in reality, every time that he came close to going to war with Iran, he backed off. And he has said things during the campaign, which is, you know, I'm happy to be friends with Iran. They can be a great country. They just cannot have nuclear weapons. He hasn't even said they cannot have a nuclear program. He has said they can't have nuclear weapons. You could say this is actually a pretty soft comment. if you were sitting and listening to this in Tehran, that he's asking us not to have something we have already said we don't want to get right now. So my sense is that if we stay where we are right now, if this doesn't escalate much further, that the war issue in the Middle East will not be a big concern during voting.
Speaking of Iranian nuclear weapons, how far is Tehran from having a deliverable nuclear weapon which can be used against Israel or the United States or wherever? What's your best estimate?
They're not near at all. Iran is very near to having enough fissile material for one bomb, but that's only the fuel for it. Making a bomb is a whole different process. Being able to deliver it, because Iran actually doesn't have an air force, so it has to be with missiles, is a whole different process. And then one bomb is not going to give you any protection. You need to have 30, 40 bombs in order to be able to do that. And Iran is many, many years away from that. So yes, it has the technology and the know-how to be able to, within a week or two, get to enough 90% enriched uranium that is good for one bomb, but not beyond that.
So, to what extent has the recent success against the Hamas, against the Hezbollah attacks inside Iran, been able to turn around Benjamin Netanyahu's fortunes? When October the 7th happened last year, his image took a massive beating. There were protests on the streets of Israel for weeks on end against him and his government. People were asking him to step down. He didn't. It seems from the outside that these recent successes have really turned his political fortunes around. His opinion ratings are higher than what they used to be. How does that impact the future of the political creature, Benjamin Netanyahu?
I mean, I'm not an expert on Israeli politics, but my read of it is that it has benefited him. He's emerging as the Churchill of Israel, a wartime prime minister that has stood tough, has fought against enemies that Israeli public is worried about. And now his message to Israelis is that I'm going to restore maximum security back to you, vis-a-vis Hamas, vis-a-vis Hezbollah, and vis-a-vis Iran. I'm going to get rid of these forces that keep you up at night. Now, that's a tall order, but it is one that, for now, it's benefiting him politically within Israel. And that's also important because it means that Prime Minister Netanyahu, for now, has to stick to this course of action. I'm going to totally destroy Hamas, totally destroy Hezbollah at any cost, and then I want to take Iran on as well, and once and for all, finish the security dilemmas that Israel is facing. Now, I don't think this strategy will work in practice, or is not as easy as he makes it, but as a political message to a people that were battered on October 7th, that are highly worried, that are angry and have a feeling of insecurity given what's happening around them and what happened on October 7th, it is a very powerful message. As I said, it's the message that Churchill ultimately gave to the British people during World War II. So yes, I think it has strengthened him.
Give us a sense of the situation in Iran at this time and the decision-making matrix. There's a new, relatively moderate president, Masoud Pezeshkian. He was attempting some kind of a rapprochement with Iran, which is potentially why Iran didn't retaliate earlier, because there was talk of a ceasefire with the Hezbollah, potentially with Hamas as well. Who calls the shots? When a decision to attack Israel is taken, is it the supreme leader? Is it the Iranian Revolutionary Guards? And how does all of this impact the new Iranian president?
Well, look, ultimate decision has to be made by the most important political figure in the country, which is the supreme leader. But as let's say in India, it would be by the prime minister, who ultimately makes the decision. But there is a national security process. These things are debated. Even within the Revolutionary Guards, there might be different opinions about when to retaliate, how aggressively to retaliate, and what to retaliate with, and what hard targets to hit. And then there are civilians, some of whom are hawkish, some of whom may be more moderate. And it's not a question just of moderation and hawkishness. It's a question of what is the interpretation of what serves Iran's interest. For instance, the Pezeshkian's view or his foreign policy team's view is that Iran also has to remain focused on negotiating, improving its economy by having nuclear talks with the United States. And you have to follow a course that protects a diplomatic pathway with the U.S. There might be somebody else, even among the civilians, who said, well, look, the United States is not going to talk to us anyways. They're not going to lift sanctions anyways. And anyways, they would respond better if we stand tough. So there is real debate in Iran about, and you could see that when the head of Hamas was killed in Iran, there was an expectation that Iran would retaliate right away. And at that point in time, the national security process made a decision that this wasn't the right time to do it. At this time, they decided that it is the time to do it. In April, they decided the time to do it. So it's not that simplistic. It's not just that this one man does this. This is a sophisticated country and with many different power centers who view their interests of Iran differently, at different weight, and also like Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu, they also have their own domestic objectives and agendas as well. And so this plays out, and I think ultimately the supreme leader decides, but he listens and people lobby, and sometimes you see him to be more hawkish because of that process, and sometimes, like when the killing of Hania, they decided to not to retaliate at that point in time.